The silence in the apartment on the Upper East Side was not empty, it was heavy, waiting to be broken. Outside, the rain lashed against the windows of the pre-war building, drumming a rhythm that felt strangely like a countdown. Inside, the air smelled of melted bittersweet chocolate and heavy cream. I stood in the center of the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from an anticipation that had slowly turned into a cold dread over the last 4 hours. On the dining table sat a chocolate mousse cake, its surface glossy and dark, reflecting the flicker of the 3 candles I had lit at 6 o'clock in the evening. It was my 67th birthday. The cake was his favorite. It was the same recipe I had made for my son Adrian since he was a curly-haired boy of 5 begging to lick the spoon. Now he was 40, a man with a wife, a mortgage, and 2 children of his own, and I was just the woman waiting in the dark. I checked my phone again. The screen was bright and harsh in the dim room. No notifications, no missed calls. Just the time glowing back at me, which read 8:45. They were late. But being late was a habit Adrian had acquired ever since he married Tessa. I told myself it was fine. Traffic coming in from Westport was terrible on Friday nights, especially in the rain. I told myself they were stopping to get flowers. I told myself 100 small lies to keep the truth from breaking my heart before the night was over. Then the phone buzzed. The sound was so loud in the quiet apartment that I jumped. My heart leaped into my throat, a sudden surge of relief washing over me. They were just running late. They were on their way. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the green icon, ready to tell them to drive safely, that the cake would keep. But it was not a call. It was a text message. A single gray bubble appeared on the screen. "Mom, do not contact us anymore. Our whole family needs space. Do not come to the house. Do not call. Please respect our boundaries." I read it once. Then I read it again. The words did not make sense. They floated on the screen like a foreign language. Boundaries. Space. Do not contact us. I sat down slowly on one of the high-backed velvet chairs, the phone slipping from my fingers onto the tablecloth. The candles flickered, casting long dancing shadows against the walls that held 30 years of memories. This was the home where I had raised him. This was the table where he had done his homework. And now, with a single sentence sent from 40 miles away, he had erased me. For a long time I just sat there. The ice inside the champagne bucket had melted into water. The mousse cake began to soften, losing its perfect shape. I did not cry. That was the strangest part. I expected tears. I expected the wailing grief of a mother whose child has severed the cord. But instead of tears, I felt a cold, creeping numbness starting at my fingertips and moving inward toward my chest. It was the feeling of a door slamming shut, not just on a room, but on a life. The next morning, the doorbell rang. A spark of pathetic hope flared in my chest. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Adrian had lost his phone. Maybe Tessa was here to apologize. I smoothed my silk robe and walked to the door, my hand shaking as I turned the brass lock. It was not Adrian. It was a courier, a young man in a blue windbreaker holding a thick manila envelope. He asked for my signature, his eyes barely meeting mine. I signed my name, Estelle Raymond, with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. When I closed the door and opened the envelope, standing in the foyer under the crystal chandelier that my late husband Grant had bought in Paris, I understood everything. Inside were not birthday cards. There were legal documents. A petition for guardianship, a capacity assessment request. A letter from a lawyer I had never met, stating that due to my recent erratic behavior and emotional instability, my son and daughter-in-law were seeking temporary control over the Grant Estelle Family Trust for my own protection. I walked into the living room and placed the papers on the coffee table. I looked at the photograph of Grant on the mantel. He had been gone for 8 years. He was a man of steel and numbers, a man who built a $50 million fortune from nothing but grit and calculated risk. He had warned me. His voice echoed in my head as clear as if he were standing right there beside me holding a glass of scotch. "Estelle," he had said, "never let your heart write a check that your brain cannot cash." I had not listened. For 8 years I had written checks with my heart. I had poured money into the void of my grief, hoping that if I filled my son's pockets enough, I could fill the empty space his father had left behind. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. The city was moving fast, indifferent to the betrayal unfolding in apartment 4B. The numbness began to recede, replaced by something else, something hotter, something sharper. I thought about the text message again. "Do not contact us." Then I looked at the legal papers. For my own protection. They did not want space. They wanted the $50 million. They wanted the trust fund, the real estate portfolio, the stocks and the bonds. And they thought I was weak enough, old enough, and lonely enough to roll over and let them take it. I turned away from the window and walked back to the dining room. The cake was still there, ruined and sour. I picked up the plate and scraped the entire thing into the trash can. The sound of the heavy porcelain spoon hitting the ceramic sink was like a gavel striking a judge's bench. I went to my study and opened the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of old holiday cards, was a leather-bound ledger and a small black box. I took them both out. The ledger was my own private record, one that Harold, my attorney, had insisted I keep. The black box contained a digital voice recorder. Grant had given it to me years ago during a nasty contract dispute. Record everything, Estelle, he had told me. People lie, but their own voices do not. I sat down and opened the ledger. The spine cracked. It had been 8 years since Grant died. 8 years of silence bought with gold. I turned to the first page, dated 2 weeks after the funeral. Entry 1, $80,000. Purpose legal fees for Adrian's first divorce. I remembered that day. Adrian crying on my sofa saying he had made a mistake, that he needed a fresh start. I wrote the check without hesitation. I wanted him to be happy. Entry 2, $150,000. Purpose luxury apartment rental in Westchester for 12 months. He needed space to heal, I had told myself. He needed to find himself again. Entry 3, $400,000. Purpose the wedding to Tessa. I closed my eyes. The wedding. It had been at the Plaza Hotel. Tessa wanted roses imported from Ecuador. She wanted a 7-tier cake. She wanted a custom dress from Milan. I paid for it all. I remembered sitting in the front row, wiping away tears of joy, thinking that finally my son was settled. I remembered Tessa hugging me, her perfume smelling of vanilla and ambition, whispering, "Thank you, Mom. You are the best." Entry 4, $2 million. Purpose down payment on the Westport house. This was the big one, the house. They called it our dream home. They took me to see it, pointing out the guest suite on the ground floor. "This is for you, Mom," Tessa had said, squeezing my hand. "When you get older, you will come live with us. We will take care of you, just like you took care of us." I ran my finger over the number 2 million. I had believed them. I had signed the transfer authorization with a smile, thinking I was buying insurance against loneliness. I did not read the fine print that listed the sponsor as having no ownership rights. I trusted them. I kept turning the pages. The numbers blurred. Tuition for the private school for my grandchildren, Maya and Owen, $60,000 a year. Summer camps in Switzerland, $30,000. A new Tesla for Tessa, because she was worried about safety, $90,000. Renovations for the kitchen because the marble was the wrong shade of white, $120,000. The total at the bottom of the last page was staggering. Over 8 years, I had transferred nearly $5 million in cash gifts, lifestyle subsidies, and soft loans that were never repaid. This did not even include the trust distributions that flowed automatically every month, covering their credit card bills, their insurance, and their club memberships. I looked at the column on the right side of the ledger. I had started tracking something else 2 years ago when the silence began to grow. Number of times Adrian called just to ask how I was doing. 0. Number of times Tessa invited me to lunch without bringing a contractor's estimate or a brochure for a vacation. 0. Number of times the grandchildren called me without being prompted by a parent to ask for a gift. 2. I realized then that I had not been raising a family. I had been funding a corporation, and I was the silent investor who had just been voted off the board. The pain of it was a physical blow. It felt like a rib snapping. I had been their safety net. I had been their bank. And the moment I became inconvenient, the moment I asked for a single night of their time on my birthday, they decided to liquidate me. I stood up and walked to the large mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I saw a woman of 67 with silver hair and lines around her eyes, but I also saw the wife of Grant Raymond. I saw the woman who had helped him navigate the bear markets of the 80s and the crash of 2008. I saw a woman who had forgotten her own strength because she was too busy trying to buy love. Tessa and Adrian thought they were dealing with a fragile old widow who would crumble at the first sign of abandonment. They thought the threat of legal action and the no-contact rule would scare me into submission. They thought I would sign those guardianship papers just to be allowed back into their lives, to see my grandchildren, to have a seat at their table. They were wrong. I went back to the kitchen. The rain had stopped. The city lights were blinking on one by one. I made myself a cup of strong black tea. I did not put sugar in it. I wanted the bitterness. I needed to wake up. I picked up the small black voice recorder. I checked the battery. It was full. I walked over to the dining table and taped it securely underneath the wood, right where the head of the table Saturday. It was invisible unless you were looking for it. Then I took out my phone. I did not reply to Adrian's text. I did not call Tessa. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled down to the name Harold Benton. Harold was Grant's bulldog. He was the most expensive estate attorney in New York, and he had been warning me for years to cut them off. I pressed the call button. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night, but Harold answered on the second ring. "Estelle," he said, his voice gravelly and alert, "is everything all right?" "No, Harold." I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. "Everything is not all right. But it is about to be corrected." "What has happened?" he asked. "I received a text message," I said, "and a package of legal documents. They want guardianship, Harold. They think I am incompetent." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a dangerous silence. Then Harold spoke, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Oh, they have made a grave error, Estelle. A very grave error. I want to review the trust," I said. "Every clause, every beneficiary designation. And Harold, I want to execute the kill switch." "Are you sure?" Estelle Harold asked. "Once we pull that lever, there is no going back. The automatic transfers will stop. The credit cards will be declined. The mortgage payments will bounce. It will be total financial blackout." I looked at the empty place where the cake had been. I looked at the dark windows. I thought about the blade-thin smile Tessa would have on her face when she realized her credit card was rejected at the country club. "I am sure," I said. "Do it. Effective immediately." "Very well," Harold said. "I will see you in my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Bring the ledger." I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark for a long time listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sirens of the city. I was alone. Truly alone for the first time in a decade. But I did not feel lonely anymore. I felt focused. They wanted space. I would give them a desert. They wanted boundaries. I would build a wall so high they would need a ladder made of gold to climb over it. I went to my bedroom and opened the safe in the closet. I took out a red envelope. Grant had always told me to keep a red envelope for emergencies. Inside was $50,000 in cash and a second voice recorder. I put the cash in my purse. I put the recorder in my pocket. I laid down on the bed, but I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the last 8 years in my mind. Every slight, every forgotten birthday. Every time they checked their watches while I was telling a story. Every time they rolled their eyes when I offered advice. I cataloged it all. I took every hurt and every humiliation, and I turned it into fuel. I was done being the victim. Tomorrow the sun would rise, and so would Estelle Grant. The next morning I arrived at Harold's office in Midtown Manhattan 15 minutes early. The building was a tower of glass and steel piercing the gray sky. I wore a navy blue suit and the pearl necklace Grant had given me for our 25th anniversary. I did not look like a woman who needed a guardian. I looked like a woman who was about to conduct a hostile takeover. Harold met me at the door of the conference room. He was a small man with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He had the documents spread out on the long oak table. "The petition they sent you is flimsy," Harold said, tapping the paper with a gold pen. "They are basing it on hearsay and the assumption that you will not fight back. They claim you are spending erratically." I laughed a dry, humorless sound. "I am spending erratically," I said. "I am spending it on them." "Exactly," Harold said, "and that stops today. I have drafted the suspension orders. Once you sign these, the bank will freeze all subsidiary accounts linked to the trust. The American Express black cards issued to Adrian and Tessa will be deactivated. The direct deposits to the private school will cease. The lease payments on Adrian's Porsche will stop." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. I thought of Maya and Owen, my grandchildren. They were innocent in this. They were just children caught in the crossfire of their parents' greed. "What about the children?" I asked quietly. Harold looked at me over his glasses. "We can set up a direct payment to the school later if you wish," he said. "But for now, if you want to send a message, the blackout must be total. They need to understand that the source of the water is you, and you control the tap." I nodded. He was right. If I softened now, if I left a single loophole, they would exploit it. I had to be ruthless to be kind. I had to break the bone to reset it properly. I signed the papers, one by one. The scratching of the pen on the paper was the only sound in the room. With every signature, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was cutting the strings. I was no longer the puppet. Now Harold said, gathering the documents, "We need to prepare for the backlash. When the money stops, they will panic. And when they panic, they will attack. They will try to expedite the guardianship. They will try to paint you as senile. We need proof, Estelle, irrefutable proof of your competency and their manipulation." "I have the ledger," I said, placing the book on the table, "and I have installed a recorder in my dining room." "Good," Harold said, "but we need more. I want you to see a specialist. Dr. Lila Khan. She is the best forensic psychiatrist in the state. I want a full cognitive evaluation. I want a paper trail that says your mind is sharper than a diamond." "I will do it," I said. And Harold added, his voice lowering, "We might need a private investigator, someone to look into where exactly all that money went. $2 million for a house renovation seems excessive, even for Westport." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You think they are hiding assets?" I asked. "I think," Harold said grimly, "that people who ask for guardianship of a wealthy mother usually have a debt they are trying to hide." I left Harold's office at 10 o'clock. The city was awake now, noisy and chaotic. I walked out onto the avenue and took a deep breath of the cold air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. Alert. Subsidiary account ending in 456 frozen. Alert. Credit card ending in 998 deactivated. It had begun. I did not go home. I went to the Apple store and bought a new laptop and 2 encrypted hard drives. Then I went to a bookstore and bought a fresh journal. I was going to document everything, every call, every text, every threat. I was not just a mother anymore. I was a case file, and I was going to be the one who wrote the verdict. By the time I returned to my apartment, it was afternoon. The sun was slanting through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the floor. I sat down at the dining table right above where the hidden recorder lay waiting. I made a cup of tea and waited. It did not take long. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Adrian. The ringtone seemed shrill and demanding. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. Then a text message. "Mom, is there something wrong with the bank account? Tessa is at the grocery store and the card was declined. Please call me back immediately. It must be a glitch." I looked at the text and took a sip of tea. It was warm and soothing. A glitch. That is what they thought. A technical error. They could not conceive of a world where I would voluntarily turn off the flow. I did not reply. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Tessa. I watched the screen light up with her name. I could imagine her standing in the checkout line at Whole Foods, her cart full of organic kale and expensive wine, her face flushing red as the cashier handed back the card. I let it go to voicemail. By 4 o'clock, the texts had changed tone. "Mom, why aren't you answering?" "Mom, call us." "Mom, this isn't funny." I sat there in the silence, my heart beating a steady rhythm. I was taking back my power, minute by minute, dollar by dollar. Then at 5 o'clock the phone rang again, but this time I picked it up. I did not say hello. I just listened. Mom, Adrian's voice was frantic, breathless. "Mom, thank God. Are you okay? We were so worried. The bank, something is happening with the accounts. Harold isn't answering. You need to fix this, Mom. We have bills due tomorrow." I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, long enough to make him uncomfortable, long enough for him to hear his own desperation echoing in the line. "Hello, Adrian," I said, my voice calm and cool like the surface of a frozen lake. "Mom, did you hear me?" Adrian said, his voice pitching up. "The money, it's cut off." "I know," I said. "I cut it." There was a pause, a stunned, suffocating pause. "What?" Adrian whispered. "What do you mean you cut it?" "I mean, I said that I received your text message. The one about boundaries, the one about space. I am respecting your wishes, Adrian. You wanted independence. Now you have it." "But Mom," Adrian stammered, that was about visiting. That wasn't about the money. You can't just..." We have a mortgage. The kids' tuition. You promised. Promises change when respect ends, I said. Mom put me on speaker. I heard Tessa's voice in the background, sharp and angry. Estela, Tessa shouted. You cannot do this. That is our money. We have a lifestyle to maintain. If you think you can control us with money, you are sick. This is exactly why we filed the papers. You are not thinking clearly. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Oh, I am thinking very clearly, Tessa, I said. Clearer than I have in 8 years. You wanted to treat me like a bank. Well, the bank is closed. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking as I put the device down on the table. But it was not from fear. It was from adrenaline. I had fired the first shot. The war had officially begun. I knew they would come. They would come to the apartment probably tomorrow morning. They would bring their anger and their entitlement and their threats. I looked down at the table where the little black box was taped underneath. Let them come. I was ready. The morning after I cut off the funds, the silence in my apartment was shattered at exactly 7:30. It was not a phone call this time. It was a pounding on the door, a heavy, desperate rhythm that echoed through the foyer. I was in the kitchen wearing my cream-colored cashmere cardigan and holding a cup of Earl Grey tea. The steam rose in a delicate spiral, catching the morning light. I did not rush. I took a sip of tea, savored the bergamot flavor, and checked the time. They were predictable. Panic does not adhere to social graces. I walked to the door, my slippers making no sound on the hardwood floor. I paused by the hallway mirror to check my reflection. My face was pale, but my eyes were clear. I looked like a woman who had slept soundly for the first time in years. I reached into the console table drawer and pressed the record button on the backup device I had placed there. The red light blinked once, then vanished. When I opened the door, Adrian and Tessa were standing there. They looked like they had run a marathon through a hurricane. Adrian's tie was crooked, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Tessa was wearing a beige trench coat over her pajamas, clutching a designer handbag as if it contained the last oxygen on Earth. Mom, Adrian gasped, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Mom, what is going on? We called Harold. He said you instructed him to stop everything. The mortgage, the schools, the credit cards. Tessa followed him, in her eyes darting around the apartment as if looking for the person who had kidnapped her mother-in-law. Estelle, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. The bank just declined my card at the gas station. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? I closed the door gently and locked it. The click of the deadbolt was loud in the tense silence. Good morning to you too, I said, my voice mild. Would you like some coffee? Coffee, Tessa practically shrieked. We do not want coffee, Estelle. We want to know why you are trying to ruin us. I walked past them into the living room and sat down in my favorite armchair. I gestured to the sofa opposite me. Sit down, I said. They hesitated, but then Saturday they looked like two scolded children who could not understand why the candy jar had been moved to the top shelf. I am not trying to ruin you, I said, placing my tea on the coaster. I am simply rearranging the terms of our relationship. Rearranging, Adrian said, running a hand through his hair. Mom, you cut us off completely. We have bills. We have a lifestyle. You can't just pull the rug out from under us. I looked at him. My son. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the park. Now he was a man who saw me only as a walking ATM machine. I pulled out my brown leather notebook from the side of the chair. I opened it to the page I had marked the night before. Adrien, I said, do you know how much money I have transferred to your household in the last 8 years? He blinked. I do not know, Mom. A lot. But that is not the point. You have plenty. Dad left $50 million. The point, I said, cutting him off, is that I have transferred $1,842,000. That is just the documented amounts. That does not include the trust distributions. I looked up at them. They were staring at me, mouths slightly open. And in that same time period, I continued, I have received 32 visits, 7 phone calls asking if I was okay, and 43 phone calls asking for money. I closed the book with a soft thud. The scale is unbalanced, I said. You have forgotten that I am your mother, not your venture capitalist. Tessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. She dropped the worried act. This is ridiculous, she spat. You are old, Estelle. You do not need that money. We are building a future. We are raising your grandchildren. If you cut us off, you are hurting Maya and Owen. Do you want them to be kicked out of school? I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. I needed to be cold. The tuition for this semester is already paid, I said. I checked. And as for the future, you are 40 years old, Adrian. If you cannot support your family by now, then perhaps you need to adjust your definition of the future. So this is it, Adrian said, his voice breaking. You are punishing us. Because we missed your birthday. I am not punishing you, I said. I am testing you. Testing us, Tessa scoffed. Yes, I said. I have a proposal. For the next 30 days, the money stays off. All of it. The cards, the transfers, the mortgage payments. You will figure it out. And then Adrian asked, hope creeping into his voice. And then I said I will decide whether or not to turn the tap back on. But during these 30 days, I want to see if we are still a family. I want you to call me because you want to talk to me. I want to see the children without a price tag attached. I want to know if there is any love left in this room or if it was all just a transaction. 30 days, Tessa whispered. We will lose the house. You will not lose the house in 30 days, I said. You might get a late fee. You might have to sell one of the cars. You might have to learn the word budget, but you will survive. Adrian looked at Tessa. Then he looked back at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating. He thought he could act the part. He thought he could play the loving son for a month to get the millions back. Okay, Mom, he said. Okay, if that is what you want, we will prove it to you. We love you, Mom. We got busy. Life gets crazy. I nodded. I hope so, Adrian, but be warned. If I sense that this is a performance, if I feel that you are just acting to get the money back, then the 30 days becomes forever. They left 10 minutes later. The air in the apartment felt lighter once they were gone. But I was not naive. I knew that the moment the elevator doors closed, the masks would fall off. I walked to the dining room and retrieved the recorder from under the table. I pressed play. I heard Tessa's voice clear and sharp. She is losing it. Did you see her eyes? She is counting phone calls, Adrian. She is obsessive. Then Adrian's voice. We just have to play along for a month, Tess. Just 30 days. We will call her. We will bring the kids. We will make her feel like the Queen of England. And once the money is back on, we will proceed with the guardianship papers. We cannot risk this happening again. She is too unstable. I stopped the recording. My hand tightened around the small black device. Unstable. That was their narrative. They were going to gaslight me. They were going to pretend to love me while building a case to lock me away. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on the desktop. I named it The Evidence. I uploaded the audio file and named it The Opening Act. The next few days were a masterclass in manipulation. On day 3, my phone rang. It was Adrian. His voice was warm, sickeningly sweet. Hi, Mom, just checking in. How are you doing today? Are you eating enough? I know you forget meals sometimes. I almost laughed. I had never forgotten a meal in my life. I am fine, Adrian, I said, my voice pleasant. I am making a salad. That is great, Mom, he said. Listen, I was thinking maybe I could come by and fix that leaky faucet in the bathroom. I know it bothers you. He had never fixed a faucet in his life. He would probably call a plumber and try to bill me for it. That is very kind of you, dear, I said, but the superintendent fixed it yesterday. Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to say I love you. I love you too, I lied. I hung up and logged the call in my journal. Call number 1. Tone fake. Content generic. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood there, almost hidden behind a bouquet of flowers so large it looked like a funeral arrangement. White lilies and pink roses. I took the card. Thinking of you, Mom. Love, Tessa. I placed the flowers on the console table. They smelled cloying and heavy. I took a picture of them and emailed it to Harold with the subject line, "The bombardment begins." Then came the children. This was the hardest part. On day 5, my phone rang with a video call request from Maya. My granddaughter was 13. She was a sweet girl, but impressionable. When I answered, her face filled the screen. She looked nervous. Her eyes kept darting to someone off camera. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice high and tight. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, softening my tone. "How is school?" "It is good," she said. "Grandma, I miss you. Daddy says you are sad." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. They were using her. They were telling her I was depressed or unstable. "I am not sad, Maya," I said, looking directly into the camera lens, hoping she could see the truth in my eyes. I am actually very good. I am just taking some time to organize things. Oh, she said. She paused as if waiting for a prompt. Then she spoke again and the words sounded rehearsed. Mom says we are a family, and families help each other. We want you to know we are here for you, Grandma. I sighed. Maya, who told you to say that? No one, she said too quickly. I wrote a poem for you. Do you want to hear it? Yes, I said. I would love to hear it. She read a short poem about flowers and sunshine. It was clearly written by a child, but the sentiment felt forced, as if she had been told to write something nice to make Grandma happy. Thank you, darling, I said. That was beautiful. Grandma, Maya whispered, leaning closer to the phone. Are you mad at Dad? He has been yelling a lot. I closed my eyes for a second. No, honey, I am not mad. Adults just have complicated problems sometimes. You do not need to worry. You just focus on your violin and your homework, okay? Okay, Grandma. Love you. Love you too. I ended the call and stared at the blank screen. Using a child as a pawn was a low that I did not think even Tessa would stoop to. But money makes people do ugly things. I knew I needed more than just recordings of phone calls. I needed to see where the money had gone. I needed to know why $2 million a year was not enough for them. I called Harold. I am ready for the private investigator, I said. Harold sent Quinn Park. Quinn arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning. He did not look like a private investigator from the movies. He did not wear a trench coat or a fedora. He looked like an accountant. He was a man in his 40s wearing a gray sweater and rimless glasses. He carried a slim briefcase and spoke in a voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. Mrs. Raymond, he said, setting up his laptop on my dining table. I have done a forensic audit of the last 5 years of transactions based on the access Harold gave me. He turned the laptop screen toward me. It was filled with spreadsheets and charts, lines of red and green numbers zigzagging across the screen. What am I looking at? I asked. This, Quinn said, pointing to a large red block, is the money you transferred to the joint account for the Westport house expenses, and this, he pointed to a green line, is where that money actually went. I leaned closer. Shell companies, Quinn said. What? I asked. Adrian and Tessa set up 3 shell companies, Quinn explained. One is called Verify Consulting, another is called TG Events, and the third is Sleek Home Solutions. And what do these companies do? I asked. Nothing, Quinn said. They are empty. But every month for the last 4 years, the joint account has been paying them generous retainer fees, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. So they are stealing from me, I said, the realization hitting me like a slap. Technically, Quinn said, pushing his glasses up his nose, they are laundering your gifts. You give them money for the house. They pay these fake companies. And the money ends up in a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered solely in Tessa's name. Tessa, I whispered. Not Adrian. Adrian is listed as a secondary beneficiary, Quinn said. But Tessa controls the signature. I sat back in my chair. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just overspending, they were hoarding. They were taking my money meant for their daily life and squirreling it away, preparing for a future where perhaps I wasn't around. There is more, Quinn said. He clicked on another folder. I pulled their email logs, Quinn said. I know Harold said we needed to be careful, but I found a vulnerability in their home network. They share a cloud account for the family business. He opened an email chain. The subject line read Capacity Strategy. I began to read. The emails were between Tessa and a lawyer named Robert Kane. Email dated 6 months ago. From Tessa to Robert Kane. Subject. Timeline. Content. Robert, his mother is getting older. She is forgetting things. We need to know what the threshold is for involuntary guardianship. The trust is substantial, and we are worried she might donate it or make bad investment choices. She listens to strangers too much. Email dated 3 months ago. From Robert Kane to Tessa. Subject. Social proof. Content. You need witnesses. Medical records are good, but social testimony is better. You need neighbors, friends, and club members to go on record saying she is acting erratic. Start documenting everything. If she misses an appointment, log it. If she gets angry, log it. We need to paint a picture of decline. I felt sick. Physically sick. The nausea rose in my throat. They have been planning this for months, I whispered, since before my birthday. Years probably, Quinn said gently. The birthday was just the trigger. They were waiting for a moment of weakness. When you didn't die of grief after your husband passed, they decided they couldn't wait for nature to take its course. They wanted the money now. I looked at Quinn. "Can I print this?" "I have already made 2 copies," Quinn said, handing me a thick red folder. "One for you, one for Harold. This is illegal on their part. Conspiracy to commit fraud, financial elder abuse. If you take this to a judge, they will not only lose the guardianship case, they could go to jail." I ran my hand over the red folder. Jail. My son in jail. The thought was unbearable. But so was the thought of him doing this to me. "Thank you, Quinn," I said. I paid him in cash from the safe. When he left, I sat alone with the red folder. I felt a strange calm settling over me. It was the calm of a soldier who has finally seen the enemy's map. I knew their plan, and because I knew it, I could destroy it. But I needed one more shield. They were attacking my mind. They were claiming I was senile, so I needed to prove I was not. The next day, I went to see Dr. Layla Khan. Her office was on Park Avenue. It was quiet and smelled of antiseptic and old books. Dr. Khan was a woman of 50 with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Harold tells me you need a capacity assessment," she said, sitting opposite me with a clipboard. "I need a bulletproof vest," I corrected her. "My son is trying to say I am losing my mind. I need you to prove I am not." She smiled. "Let us begin." The test took 4 hours. It was exhausted. We went through memory exercises, logic puzzles, pattern recognition, and psychological screening. I had to recall lists of random words. I had to draw complex geometric shapes from memory. I had to explain the meaning of abstract proverbs. At the end, Dr. Khan put down her pen. "Mrs. Raymond," she said, "I have tested CEOs half your age who did not score this high. Your cognitive function is in the 99th percentile for your age group. Your logic centers are firing perfectly. You show signs of high stress, yes, but absolutely no signs of dementia or cognitive decline." She stamped the document with her official seal. "This is admissible in any court in the country," she said, handing it to me. "If they try to question your capacity, show them this. It will shut them down instantly." I walked out of her office holding that paper like a sword. I was armed. I had the financial records. I had the conspiracy emails. I had the medical clearance. But the war was not over. The social war was just beginning. 2 days later, my friend Marjorie called me. Marjorie was a gossip, but she was a loyal gossip. She lived 2 blocks away and spent her days at the country club playing bridge and collecting secrets. "Estelle," she said, her voice hushed, "I am at the club. Tessa is here. She is having lunch with the tennis committee ladies." And I asked, bracing myself. "She is crying," Marjorie said. "She is telling everyone that you are having episodes. She says you forgot who she was the other day. She says you are spending thousands of dollars on scams. She is asking for recommendations for care facilities, high-security ones." My hand tightened on the phone, so they were executing the plan, the social proof. "What are people saying?" I asked. "Well, Marjorie said some people are buying it." "You haven't been to the club in a while, Estelle. Silence breeds rumors." But I told them it was hogwash. I told them I saw you last week and you were sharper than a tack. "Thank you, Marjorie," I said. "Listen to me. Do not fight her. Let her talk. Let her dig her hole." "Are you sure?" Marjorie asked. "She is dragging your name through the mud." "I am sure," I said. "I want her to feel confident. I want her to think she is winning." I hung up. I looked at the calendar. It had been 25 days since the no-contact text, 5 days left of my 30-day challenge. It was time to spring the trap. I picked up the phone and called Adrian. "Hi, Mom," he answered on the first ring. He sounded tired. The 30 days of paying his own bills were obviously taking a toll. "Adrian," I said, making my voice sound weary and soft. "I have been thinking." "Yes, Mom," he said, eager. "This separation," I said. "It is too hard. I miss the family." "We miss you too, Mom," he said quickly. "So much." "I want to have a dinner," I said. "To celebrate the end of the 30 days, I want to discuss the future, the trust, the house, everything." "Really, Mom?" Adrian breathed a sigh of relief. "That is great. We would love that." "Let us do it at the Westport house," I said. "This Friday, 7 o'clock. I will bring dessert." Perfect, Adrian said. We will be there. And Adrian, I added, I am inviting a few old friends, Jacob and Naomi. You remember them, from your father's firm. Adrian hesitated. Why are they coming? They are executors of your father's estate, I lied. If we are going to discuss the future of the trust, they should be there, to make it official. Oh, right. Okay. That makes sense. See you Friday, I said. I hung up and smiled. Jacob was a retired judge. Naomi was a family therapist. They were not executors. They were witnesses. I wanted neutral third parties in the room. I wanted people of high standing to see exactly who Adrian and Tessa were. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I spent hours organizing my evidence. I created 3 identical packets, one for me, one for Harold, and one to place in the center of the dining table. I called Harold. Friday night, I said, be by your phone, I will have you on speaker. I will be ready, Estelle, Harold said. Do not waver. I will not. Friday evening arrived. The sky was a bruised purple over the city as I got into the car service I had hired. I wore the same black dress I had worn to Grant's funeral. It was elegant, severe, and commanding. I wore the pearls. I carried my large handbag which contained the red folder, the recorder, and the medical report. The drive to Westport took an hour. I watched the city fade away, replaced by the manicured lawns and gated driveways of the suburbs. This was the world I had bought for them, a world of comfort and safety, and they had tried to turn it into my prison. When the car pulled up to the house, it was ablaze with light. Every window was glowing. They were putting on a show. Tessa opened the door before I could even knock. She was wearing a silk dress and a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mom, she cried, reaching out to hug me. We missed you so much. I let her hug me. Her body felt stiff. I smelled wine on her breath. Hello, Tessa, I said, pulling away. You look expensive. She blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or an insult. Come in, she said. Adrian is opening the wine. The kids are in the living room. I walked into the house. It was beautiful. I had paid for the marble floors. I had paid for the crystal chandelier. I had paid for the art on the walls. It felt like walking into a museum of my own generosity. Adrian came out of the kitchen holding a bottle of Bordeaux. Mom, he said, grinning. Welcome home. He tried to kiss my cheek, but I turned my head so his lips grazed the air. Hello, Adrian, I said. Where are Jacob and Naomi? They are in the living room, Adrian said. They are talking to the kids. I walked into the living room. Jacob and Naomi were sitting on the sofa looking uncomfortable. Maya and Owen were sitting on the floor playing on their iPads. Jacob stood up when he saw me. He was a tall man with white hair and the bearing of someone who had sent men to prison for less than what was about to happen here. Estelle, he said, taking my hand, you look wonderful. Thank you, Jacob, I said. Naomi, thank you for coming. Naomi nodded, her eyes kind. We are here for you, Estelle. Let us eat, I said. I do not want to delay the main course. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the fine china I had bought them for their 5th anniversary. Candles were burning. It looked like a scene from a magazine. We sat down. I took the head of the table. It was my house after all, even if the deed was in the trust. Adrian sat to my right, Tessa to my left. Jacob and Naomi sat at the other end. The conversation started with painful pleasantries. Tessa talked about the weather. Adrian talked about the traffic. I answered in monosyllables. Did you fix the faucet? Adrian asked, trying to sound casual. Yes, I said. And have you been feeling okay? Tessa asked, pouring me more wine. You know, with your memory and everything. I put my fork down. The clink against the china was loud. My memory is excellent, Tessa, I said, looking her dead in the eye. For example, I remember that 3 years ago on this day, I transferred $50,000 to your account for a kitchen renovation that never happened. Tessa choked on her wine. Adrian froze. Mom, Adrian said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. What are you talking about? I am talking about memory, I said, and since we are on the subject, let us talk about the last 30 days. I reached into my bag and pulled out the red folder. I placed it in the center of the table. What is that? Tessa asked, her voice losing its sweetness. This, I said, is the end of the play. I opened the folder. Exhibit A, I said, pulling out the spreadsheet Quinn had made. This is a record of the shell companies you set up. Verify Consulting, Sleek Home Solutions. Do those names ring a bell? Adrian's face went white. Tessa gripped the edge of the table. "I don't know what those are," Adrian stammered. "Stop it," I said, my voice sharp. "Do not lie to me. Not anymore. I have the bank records, Adrian. I know about the Cayman accounts. I know you have been siphoning money from the trust for 4 years." Jacob leaned forward, his judge's instincts kicking in. He looked at the papers and then at Adrian with disgust. "Mom," Adrian said, standing up, "this is a misunderstanding. We were just investing it. For the family." "Investing," I repeated. "Is that what you call it? And what about the emails to Robert Kane?" I pulled out the second stack of papers. "Soft guardianship," I read aloud. "Build a social case. Make her look unstable." Tessa let out a small cry. She looked at Jacob and Naomi, who were now staring at her in horror. "You hacked our emails," Tessa shrieked. "That is illegal." "You are stealing my money and plotting to lock me away," I said, my voice rising. "Do not talk to me about legality, Tessa." I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. "You wanted to prove I was incompetent," I said. "You wanted to tell the world I was a senile old woman who needed protection." I pulled out the medical report from Dr. Khan. I slammed it onto the table. "Read it," I commanded. "Read it, Adrian." He looked down at the paper. Fully lucid, he read, his voice whispering. "Cognitive function superior. No signs of decline." "That is right," I said. "I am sane. I am smart. And I am done." I pulled out my phone and dialed Harold. I put it on speaker. "Harold," I said, "they are all here. Tell them." Harold's voice filled the room, amplified and authoritative. "Adrian, Tessa, this is Harold Benton. As of this morning, the Grant Estelle Family Trust has been restructured. The discretionary beneficiary clause has been revoked due to evidence of fraud and embezzlement." "What does that mean?" Adrian cried. "It means Harold said that you are cut off. Permanently. And furthermore, Mrs. Raymond has instructed me to serve you with an eviction notice." "Eviction?" Tessa screamed. "You can't evict us. This is our home." "It is trust property," Harold said calmly, "and the trust no longer permits you to reside there. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you do not leave, the sheriff will remove you." I looked at my grandchildren. Maya was crying silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. Owen looked terrified. My heart broke for them. But I knew that if I didn't stop this now, they would grow up to be just like their parents. I hung up the phone. "Mom," Adrian said, moving towards me. "Mom, please. You can't do this. Where will we go? We have no money. The accounts are frozen." "You have the money in the Cayman Islands," I said coldly, "unless you spent that too." "We can't access that," Adrian said. It's tied up." "Then you better get jobs," I said. I looked at Tessa. She was not crying anymore. She was looking at me with pure hatred. "I hate you," she hissed. "You are a cruel old witch." I smiled. "And you are a thief, Tessa. But unlike you, I am not sending you to jail. I am giving you a chance. 30 days. Find a job. Find an apartment. Learn to live within your means." I turned to Jacob and Naomi. "I think dinner is over," I said. "Would you please escort me to my car?" Jacob stood up immediately. He walked over to Adrian and looked down at him. "You should be ashamed, son," he said. "Your father would be ashamed." Adrian flinched as if he had been slapped. I walked over to the kids. I knelt down. "Maya, Owen," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "Grandma loves you. This is not your fault. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, sniffing. "I will see you soon," I said. "I promise." I stood up and walked toward the door. I did not look back at the table with the uneaten food and the scattered papers. I did not look back at my son, who was now sobbing into his hands. I walked out into the cool night air. The wind felt clean. I felt a tremendous weight falling away from me. The cord was cut. The leash was removed. I got into the car. Jacob and Naomi stood by the window. "Are you okay?" Estelle Naomi asked. I looked at the house one last time. "Yes," I said. "I am finally okay." The car pulled away. I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. It was just a house. It was bricks and mortar. It was not my family. My family was somewhere else, waiting to be rebuilt on a foundation of truth. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The war was over. Now the healing could begin. The 30 days passed like a slow fever. I did not visit the house in Westport. I did not call. I sat in my apartment in the city and watched the calendar pages turn. Every tick of the clock was a question. Would they sink or would they swim? On the 30th day, Harold called me at 9 in the morning. "It is done, Estelle," he said. "The keys have been surrendered. The locksmith is there now changing the cylinders. The inventory check is complete. They took their personal items and the furniture they paid for. The rest remains." "Did they make a scene?" I asked, my voice quiet. "No," Harold said. "They were quiet. Defeated, I would say." Adrian looked older, and Tessa was not wearing makeup. "They drove away in the sedan. The Porsche was repossessed last week." "And the children?" I asked. "They are safe," Harold assured me. "They have rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Stamford. It is small, but it is in a decent neighborhood. The tuition is paid directly by your trust, so their school routine is uninterrupted." "Thank you, Harold," I said. I hung up the phone. I expected to feel triumphant. I had won. I had reclaimed my property and protected my fortune. But I did not feel victory. I felt a deep, hollow ache. A mother never wants to win a war against her child because that victory implies that the child has failed. I waited 3 months before I saw them again. I needed the silence. And they needed the reality. During those 3 months, I was not idle. I dissolved the original trust. I created a new legal entity, the Grant and Estelle Raymond Foundation. Its mission was to support financial literacy programs for the elderly and scholarship funds for underprivileged students. I took the $50 million that had been the source of so much poison in my family, and I turned it into a river that would water 1,000 other gardens. I kept enough for myself to live comfortably until the end of my days. But the days of private jets and endless handouts were over. It was a Tuesday in November when I finally drove to Stamford. I had the address from Harold. It was a garden apartment complex near the train tracks. The paint was peeling slightly on the railings, and the landscaping was modest. It was a far cry from the manicured lawns of Westport. I parked my car and walked to apartment 4B. I took a deep breath and knocked. Adrian opened the door. He looked different. The soft, doughy look of a man who lives on unearned income was gone. His face was thinner. There were new lines around his eyes. He was wearing a plain white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and there was a smudge of ink on his cheek. "Mom," he said. He did not move to hug me. He stood in the doorway, uncertain. "Hello, Adrian," I said. "May I come in?" He stepped back. "Yeah, of course. Come in." The apartment was small. The living room doubled as the dining room. There was no crystal chandelier. There was just a simple lamp from IKEA. But the place was clean, painfully clean. And on the small table there was a vase with fresh wildflowers, not expensive roses but simple daisies. Tessa was in the kitchen area chopping vegetables. When she saw me, she froze. She put the knife down and wiped her hands on a towel. She wore jeans and a sweater. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. The glassy, arrogant look was gone. "Hi, Estelle," she said softly. I looked around. "Where are the kids?" "Soccer practice," Adrian said. "I pick them up in an hour." I sat down on the beige sofa. It was lumpy. So I said, "Tell me." Adrian sat on the chair opposite me. He clasped his hands between his knees. "I am working," he said. "Project management for a logistics company. It is entry-level, essentially. The pay is, well, it is not what I am used to. But it pays the rent. And I am working too," Tessa said. "I got a job as an event coordinator for the local community center. It is chaotic and the budget is 0, but I am actually good at it." I looked at them, really looked at them. For the first time in years, they were not trying to sell me something. They were not presenting a polished image to get a check. They were just people. Struggling, tired, real people. "And the debt?" I asked. "We are paying it off," Adrian said grimly. "Slowly. We sold the jewelry. We sold the designer bags. The Cayman account. We liquidated it to pay back the shell companies so we wouldn't go to jail. We are at 0, Mom. Actually, we are a bit below 0. "Good," I said. They both flinched. "I do not say that to be cruel," I continued. "I say that because 0 is a solid place to stand. You cannot fall off the floor." Adrian looked up at me, and his eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry, Mom," he whispered. The words came out choked and rough. "I am so sorry for the letters, for the guardianship, for making you feel like you were losing your mind. I was so scared of being poor. I thought the money made me who I was. And now I asked." "Now," Adrian said, looking around the small, cramped room. "Now I am just Adrian. And strangely, I sleep better. I come home tired, but I sleep. Tessa walked over and sat next to him. She took his hand. We almost divorced, she said honestly. When the money stopped, we screamed at each other for weeks. We blamed each other. But then, we looked at Maya and Owen, and we realized we were the only thing they had left. So we decided to stay. To try. I nodded. A lump formed in my throat. This was it. This was the gold I had been looking for. Not the millions in the bank, but this small, fragile nugget of integrity. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. I am not giving you money, I said quickly, seeing their eyes widen. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 brochures. This is for the foundation, I said, the Grant and Estelle Raymond Foundation. We are launching a scholarship program next year. I looked at Tessa. We need an event director, I said, someone who knows how to stretch a budget, someone who knows how to organize a gala without spending a fortune. It pays a market salary, nothing extravagant. But it is honest work. Tessa covered her mouth with her hand. You would hire me, she asked. After everything I did. You are good at organizing, Tessa, I said. You just used your talent for the wrong reasons. If you want the job, you have to interview for it with the board. I will not hand it to you. But I will put your resume in the pile. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. I will interview. I will work harder than anyone. I turned to Adrian. And you, I said. You are a project manager now. The foundation needs someone to oversee the construction of the new community clinic in the Bronx. It is a contract position. If you do well, it could become permanent. Again, you have to apply. You have to prove you can handle it. Adrian looked at me, and for a moment I saw his father in his face, the set of his jaw, the determination. I will apply, he said. And Mom, I will not let you down. I stood up. I did not want to make a scene. I did not want to hug them and say everything was forgiven. Forgiveness is a garden, it takes time to grow. I have to go, I said. I have a yoga class at 6. You do yoga? Adrian asked, a small smile touching his lips. I am trying new things, I said. Now that I am not managing a family hedge fund, I have a lot of free time. I walked to the door. Mom, Adrian called out. I turned. Happy birthday, he said, belated. I smiled. And this time, it reached my eyes. Thank you, Adrian. I walked out to my car. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the modest apartment complex. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the window of apartment 4B. I saw the light turn on. I saw Tessa move to the kitchen. I saw Adrian sit down at the table and open his laptop, probably to update his resume. It was an ordinary scene, boring even, but to me it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was the picture of a life being built, not bought. I started the engine and drove back to the city. 1 year later, my 69th birthday. The apartment on the Upper East Side was filled with people, but this time it was not a stiff formal party. There were no caterers in black ties. Marjorie was there laughing with Jacob near the window. Naomi was holding a plate of appetizers. Harold was arguing good-naturedly with Quinn about baseball. And in the kitchen the oven was open. The smell of chocolate mousse cake filled the air. Maya and Owen were at the table covering a large card with glitter and markers. They were laughing. Grandma, look, Owen shouted, holding up the card. I drew a picture of you doing yoga. I laughed. It looked more like a pretzel than a person, but I loved it. Adrian and Tessa were by the stove. They were wearing aprons. They were arguing about the temperature of the chocolate, but they were smiling. Mom, Adrian called out, Do we let it cool before the cream? You figure it out, I said, sipping my wine. I am retired from the kitchen today. They laughed. I looked around the room. My heart felt full. It was not perfect. Adrian still worried about bills sometimes. Tessa still looked longingly at expensive store windows. But they handled it. They paid their own way. They called me on Sundays not to ask for a transfer, but to tell me about their week. The foundation was thriving. The clinic was halfway built. Adrian was there every day wearing a hard hat and checking invoices. He was strict with the contractors. He told me once that he knew all the tricks because he used to use them. Tessa was running the scholarship gala. She had cut the budget by 30% and secured 3 new corporate sponsors. She was tough, she was efficient, and she treated me with a deference that was born of respect, not fear. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. It was a courier. For a second, a shadow of the past crossed my mind. The last time a courier came, he brought a lawsuit. I opened the door. The young man handed me a small package. "Sign here, please." I signed. I opened the box. Inside was a simple silver frame. And in the frame was a photograph. It was taken last month at the construction site. It was Adrian and Tessa and the kids standing in the mud wearing boots and hard hats. They were dirty. They were tired. But they were holding hands. And they were smiling. On the back of the photo in Adrian's handwriting were 3 words. "Thank you, Mom." I placed the photo on the mantel next to the picture of Grant. I looked at Grant's photo. His eyes seemed to twinkle in the candlelight. "We did it, Grant," I whispered. "It took a crash to fix the engine, but we are running smooth now." I turned back to the room. "Cake is ready," Tessa announced, carrying the platter to the table. It was slightly lopsided. The frosting was a bit uneven. It was nothing like the perfect glossy cakes I used to order from the French bakery. It was the best cake I had ever seen. I sat down at the head of the table. My family gathered around me. No one was checking their phone. No one was looking at the clock. "Make a wish," Grandma Maya said. I looked at the candles. I looked at my son who had finally become a man. I looked at my daughter-in-law who had finally found her dignity. I looked at my grandchildren who were learning that love is a verb, not a currency. I blew out the candles. I did not need to wish for anything. I had everything right here. I am Estelle Grant. I am 69 years old. I live alone, but I am not lonely. I have learned that the hardest thing a mother can do is to stop giving, but sometimes the empty hand is the one that holds on the tightest. If you are listening to this from a quiet room or a busy street, remember this: you teach people how to treat you. You teach them with what you accept and what you refuse. Do not be afraid to close the door, because sometimes that is the only way to get them to knock with respect. Thank you for listening to my story.